All right. Well, it's recording. Let's hope the battery lasts. Right, 2 hours.
So how much of a screen do you have?
I have the entire screen. It's just keys don't really have it. It's kind of tilted.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So on line 14, we got several things to do. The last operation is an assignment operation, but we can't get to that. The second last operation is the invocation of subtract. We cannot do that either, because in order to invoke subtract, we need to know what value do we want to pass to x and what value do we want to pass to y. We don't know those yet, right? So we now have to select one of these two. Do we want to invoke 5 first, or do we want to invoke 7 first? Doesn't really matter. Most compilers would go like, well, is your pick. Does anyone want to do with one or the other first?
7.
7? Okay, so we'll invoke 7 first. So if 7 is the one that we're invoking on this line, when we get back to line 14, the remaining things that we have to do will look like this. On line 14, the assignment operation is not done yet. The invocation of subtract is not done yet. But the invocation of 7 will be done, and then whatever value it returns can now be used to specify parameter x. On the other side, let me change this a little bit. So on the other side, 5 is not invoked yet, so that is remaining to be done. And until 5 is invoked, I do not know what value that I have to use to specify parameter y. So this is what return info is going to look like. Yep.
I have a question. If the program starts after where it says main, why doesn't main go on the top?
Say that one more time.
If the program starts after once you say define main, well, why doesn't that go on the top?
It doesn't have to.
Doesn't it make more sense?
Not necessarily. The positioning of the definition of the subroutines do not matter. So you can define main first. You can define subtract first. You can define 7 first. None of that should matter. Okay. All right. So are there any questions about how return info is specified in this case? In other words, I'm basically copying and pasting the entire line 14, save for just invoke 7. That's the only part that I turn into a question mark, which is a placeholder. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. All right. So that's column D. And then what we'll do is to say, do we have anything else to specify other than return info? That depends on 7. So when you look at 7 as a subroutine, it doesn't have any parameters. It does not have a local variable. So it doesn't need anything other than a return info. Are we still doing okay so far? So column D is the only thing we need in order to invoke 7. When we get into 7 as a subroutine, the only thing we're going to do is on line 10, which is returning a value of 7. When you return a value, what you're doing is you're copying and pasting the return info line, and then the only thing you're going to do is to replace the question mark with the value that the subroutine is returning. In this particular case, we're returning a value of 7, so the question mark is changed to 7. Do we have any questions about line 10 or the effect of the return statement? Any questions? Okay. So after line 10, we get to line 11. Line 11 is the end of the subroutine. It has got 2 things to do. One, the first thing it has to do is to say, where am I going back when the subroutine is done? Well, this is what line 14 looks like when we get back to line 14. So that's why I have to copy the entire thing, because if I just say line 14 here, then I would have no idea what else do I have to do on line 14, because it looks brand new to me. Yep.
So line 10 is saying that it's calling, I don't understand, so it's calling subtract 7 and then calling 5, invoking 5, I don't know what is going on with that.
We are only invoking the 7.
And then when 5.
So that's why the invoke 7 is the only part that is replaced by a question mark.
goes back to line 14 because it still has to take care of invoke 5, right?
There are several things to do on line 14. We are going to go back to line 14 a few more times. Okay? But we can only take care of things one thing at a time.
Right.
So you have to kind of say, okay, what do we have to do first? We cannot do the assignment. We cannot call subtract because in order to call a subroutine, all the parameters must be specified first. So we cannot call subtract. We can call 7 because it doesn't rely on anything else. We can call 5 as well. So the selection between those two is kind of arbitrary. The compiler can sometimes choose to call 5 first, and other times it can choose to call 7 first. That part does not really matter. So are we doing okay so far with this? Okay. All right. So when this is done, okay, we have to remember to deallocate return info because every time we are at the end of a subroutine, we look up return info, but then we have to go back and deallocate return info. So we're going to deallocate this. Now we're back to line 14. When we get back to line 14, I still cannot perform the assignment because we cannot invoke subtract either. So the only thing I'm left that I can do is to invoke 5. So this time I'm going to invoke 5 when I'm on line 14. So this is the part that will look really kind of confusing, not only because of the concept, but also because the notation is kind of take up a little bit more space. So when we execute line 14 when it's like this, then we are going to reallocate return info. But this time after we reallocate return info, we are going to change invoke 5 into a question mark. Because that is the only invoke I'm dealing with this time on line 14. So now when we specify this return info, okay.
So you turn something into a question mark when you're only dealing with one subroutine?
We turn the entire invoke into a question mark. So at this time, when we specify what we need to do when we get back to line 14, the assignment still needs to occur. The invocation of subtract still needs to occur, but we already know what we're going to use to specify x. We don't know, we will find out what to use to specify y. So when we get back to line 14, this is what we need to do. Are we okay with that? So the question mark is representing a placeholder and say, well, that's the only thing we want to figure out. Okay, we want to figure out what value are we going to use to specify parameter y. Is that okay? So the mechanism of invoking a subroutine that has a return value is really just replace the invocation itself with a question mark. And then the return statement, in this case, on line 7, is going to replace that question mark with the value 5. All right? So are we okay about row 9 and 10 in the trace? Okay. So now we get into the subroutine. Okay, so I have to kind of keep moving things around a little bit. Subroutine 5 only has one single return statement on line 7. So now we get to line 7. Line 7 is a return statement. Every single return statement, when you execute a return statement, its only thing to do is to replace the question mark of the rightmost return info cell with the value that you're returning. So in this case, we are returning 5, so the question mark is replaced by the value 5. That is the only thing that line 7 is supposed to do. Now we get to line 8. Line 8 has two things to do. One is to find out what we are supposed to go back, where we are supposed to go back to. This is representing where we're going back to, and what else do we have to do when we get back to line 14. So
deallocate.
Oh, and also deallocate, the second thing. So we make a note of this first, okay? And then we deallocate column D again. There we go. So is that okay so far? So at this point we have called 7. We know what value to use to specify parameter x. We have called 5. We know what value that we need to use to specify parameter y. So now we can finally call or invoke subtract, because both parameters of subtract are now specified. So this is important to remember. You cannot invoke a subroutine until all of its parameters are specified. Any questions? Okay, no questions? So if there are no questions, then we'll go ahead and execute line 14 again, but this time it looks like this. We know parameter x, we know parameter y, so it's time to invoke subtract. So now we go back to reallocate column D as a return info cell. This time on line 14, when we get back, it is only going to be the assignment that we have to perform. So this time, the return info cell looks a lot simpler because we are replacing the entire invoke subtract, including the specification of its parameters, with a single question mark. Is that okay? All right. So now we get into subtract. Subtract only has one line that actually executes something useful, which is line 4. Line 4 wants to return, I forgot one thing, two things. Because subtract has parameters, we have to specify parameter x and parameter y. Parameter x has a value of 7, parameter y has a value of 5, so we have to remember to specify those two parameters. I forgot earlier. Okay. So when we get back to line 4, which is in the middle of subtract, we have to add 5 and 7 together. Actually, it's the other way around. X is 7, y is 5, but they add up to 12 regardless. So it's returning a value of 12. When we execute the return statement, we look up the rightmost return info cell, copy and paste it, and then we change the question mark to whatever value that we are returning. This time is 12. So you might look at this and go like, oh, this means we also know what we need to put into variable x, which is in column C. No, okay? The return statement does not understand how the return value is going to be utilized. We can see it, but the computer executing the program cannot. So the only thing for the return statement to do is to change the question mark to whatever value you're returning. So are we okay with that? Is that clear? Okay. So now we're done with line 4. We get to line 5. Have two things to do. First thing is to note where we are supposed to go back to. We're going back to line 14 again. And then we have to deallocate column D. So now we continue execution on line 14. Oh, that looks a lot simpler. It's just an assignment statement with a constant of 12 on the right-hand side, and x is the variable to be updated. X as a variable is column C. So at this point, we can now finally update column C to be 12. And then we are done with line 14. Then we go back and we continue on to line 15. Line 15 has got two things to do. The first thing it has to do is to say, where are we supposed to go back to? It is post. And then the second thing it has to do is to deallocate. I forgot one more thing. Sorry about that. I couldn't see it, so it makes it kind of easy to forget. X and Y also need to be deallocated when we return from subtract. So I forgot about that. There we go. All right. So when main returns, we have two columns to deallocate. We have return info and X to deallocate. So we'll do both of those. We'll deallocate both columns when we execute line 15. And when this is all done, we continue execution at post, and that means we are all done. There's nothing else to execute in this code. Are there any questions about the trace? This one is a little bit more tricky because we got to line 14 how many times?
A bunch.
4 times. This is the first time, second time, third time, and this is the last time. So we got to line 14 4 times to finish what it needs to do. But are there any questions? Yep.
I just wanted to, can you repeat how you got x equals question mark, or x gets question mark on 14?
You mean this one here?
No, 14 on the actual spreadsheet.
On the spreadsheet?
On the
I
trace.
also
On the
remember
trace.
This one, trace.
Yes.
Okay. It's replacing the invocation of subtract to a question mark. So So the entire invocation of subtract starts from invoke, and it ends with the specification of parameter file.
Okay, okay.
So
that makes
this
more sense.
entire thing got replaced by a single question mark.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Good question. Very good. So that means we are ready for something. Yes,
Can you put it in the whole screen so I can take a picture of the whole thing?
I'm recording using my phone right now.
Oh, so you're gonna upload that to Canvas or something?
I'll upload what I have.
Then you're running out of battery.
Well, I have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, so it might last a little bit. You know, when we take a break, we'll check. The other thing I can do that too, because the computer is plugged in and it has a camera, so I can use that too. So we might consider doing that option next. That'd be pretty awesome, right? You use one computer only as a recorder and then do everything on the other computer. Yep.
What about downloading OBS onto that one?
I cannot download or install anything. Everything is locked down on these computers.
Like that.
Yeah, the only thing I can do if I want to do something like that is to disconnect the computer and reconnect my computer using the same connection.
Just create a new admin account on there.
They lock down the BIOS too.
Right,
So now you have to take the case off, use that jumper, to reset the BIOS, to remove the password.
Fair enough.
Yep. Okay, getting back to this program, are there any questions about the trace of this particular program? No questions? Okay, so I think you guys are ready for factorial now. Okay, so factorial is interesting because you will end up with a return and an invocation on the same line. Okay, so this can get confusing. If you guys need to slow down or ask questions, please do that. Because this particular program, is a little bit harder to track. So it is factorial, I would say it's fact. And then by val n, whatever value you pass through it, and then there's a conditional state. I'm just thinking about what to do with this. Okay. I think I'll do it the C way, so we'll check this out. If n is less than or equal to 1, then we'll do it in one particular way. We just return a value of 1. Else, we'll return something that is different, which is n times the factorial. Okay, I'll invoke factorial, but we use n minus 1 to specify n. And if n define sub, and I will fix the indentation right away. So as I type this, you guys can start to think about, what this code is going to do and how we're going to track it. So now we have the usual stuff, define main, local variable x gets the factorial of invoke factorial. We'll try out 3. Okay, so we will try to find the factorial of 3. And define sub, invoke main, and then fix up the indentation here. Then we will be ready to trace this particular program. All right. Are there any questions? Just looking at the code itself. Just looking at the pseudocode, are there any questions? Well, I got a question right away. On line 6, there are 2 n's. What are we talking about here? This n here, okay, is the parameter of the subroutine that we're calling. This n here is the parameter that is of the subroutine executing line 6. So there are 2 quote-unquote subroutines. One is the subroutine containing or executing the return statement. The other subroutine is the subroutine that the return statement is trying to invoke. Is that concept okay?
drawing?
Can you it one more time?
Okay, I'll explain it one more time. The arrow is important because the arrow specifies which side is the parameter that we are, which one is the parameter of the subroutine that we're invoking, which side is the expression of the subroutine that we're currently in. Okay? Okay, so if this is a little bit too obscure, okay, we'll do it a little bit differently. Okay, so we'll change the code a little bit. So we'll go ahead and insert here, and we'll specify a local variable. Okay, local variable, let's call that p, okay? And then over here, we'll insert a row so that we can now use p to store the value of n. So forget about the case sensitivity thing, it's case insensitive. I don't want to reconfigure LibreOffice to deal with case sensitivity. So here, please, there we go. And then change this n to p. Is that better? Because we don't see n on both sides of the arrow anymore. But it really means exactly the same thing. We are just wasting a local variable as an intermediate thing. But is that working? Is that okay? Now, if you guys prefer, we can even do the n minus 1 when we are calculating what to put into p. So now, when we invoke the subroutine, it's really just p that we need. We don't need p minus 1 anymore. So that makes it even more clear. Is that okay? All right, so we'll make it even more clear because the return statement is going to be a problem, okay, the way it is. So we're going to make this even more clear by introducing another statement in between. So we'll change the return statement to an assignment to p. And then we'll return p here. There we go. So now we do not end up with a return statement that also has an invoke in it. Is that okay? So I'm breaking up one thing that could have been done on a single line using a single statement into 3 separate statements. Okay? So once we understand this one, with everything kind of broken up into smaller pieces, then we'll put everything back together and see if we understand, why we can do it on one single line using a single statement. Is that okay? Yep.
I'm honestly still having a hard time understanding this concept. What does invoking the fact do?
It's calling the subroutine.
Okay, so the fact is just what the subroutine is called.
It's the subroutine that it is invoking.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you read line 8 for me?
Line 8 says I am using the return value of invoking factorial using p as the parameter n, okay? And I take the return value of that invocation of factorial, I multiply that value by n, the product is then used to update p as a local variable.
No, that didn't help.
Wait, so we're updating p with the product of n times the
Okay.
invocation of the.
Okay, how about this? We use another local variable p and change this to q.
What's this? First, you using 2 local variables.
Sorry?
Why are you using 2 local variables?
He's trying to break it up so we can understand.
I'm breaking it up into steps that do not involve the use of the same variable or the same symbol as much as possible.
He's mushing it into baby.
So does factorial actually have a specific meaning, or are you, because you're obviously creating a subroutine called factorial or callback,
Yep.
but are you just using this subroutine you've made to represent what a factorial is, or does factorial have a specific definition?
So I made an assumption. A factorial is a very useful function. So when you look at factorial, it can be defined recursively or non-recursively.
Okay, so you're using a subroutine to show us what it means, basically.
I am using the subroutine to illustrate recursion, but I'm also using a subroutine to demonstrate how we can calculate factorial.
Okay.
So the factorial, so let's get back to just the factorial. Okay. So, okay. So the factorial of 5 is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which seems interesting, doesn't seem very useful, right? Well, factorial turns out to be a very, very useful function when you're calculating probabilities and also permutations and combinations. Okay? Has anyone ever bought a lotto ticket ever in your entire life?
Yeah.
Okay. Has anyone not bought a single ticket in your entire life? Okay. If you want to know your chances of winning in the lotto, factorial is important. Now, factorial by itself is not the answer, but factorial is what we need to compute permutations and combinations. And those are what we need in order to figure out the chances of winning lotto, like the jackpot or winning like 2 of the 5 lucky numbers and so on. We can do all of that calculation using factorial. It's a very fundamental function. So factorial is a really useful function on its own, but in this